Good morning, friends. I am here today to do a read aloud with you, and I'm sitting outside on my deck, and I'm doing it for a reason. The book that we're reading today is Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and you'll understand when we start to read the book why I'm outside, because a lot of this relates to being outside and the weather and things falling from the sky. So I thought it would be kind of neat to read outside today. So this is written by Judy Barrett, and it is drawn or illustrated by Ron Barrett. And it's Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could each eat. And Grandpa was doing the flipping. He was flipping the pancakes. Seconds later, something flew through the air, headed toward the kitchen ceiling, and landed right on Henry. After we realized that the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully, meaning nothing else really exciting happened. All the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. I think he looked pretty funny with that pancake on his head. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the tall tale bedtime story he had ever told. He said, across an ocean over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean, there lay the tiny town of Chew and Swallow. Do you guys get bedtime stories read to you? It's always nice to have that story. It kind of relaxes you sometimes. In most ways, it was very much like our tiny town. It had Main Street lined with stores, houses with trees and gardens around them. It had a schoolhouse and about 300 people and some cats and dogs. But there were no food stores in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need any. The sky supplied all the food they could possibly want. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was its weather. It came 3 times a day, at breakfast, at lunch, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. And it came 3 times a day. Whatever the weather served, that was what they ate. But it never rained rain. It never snowed snow, and it never blew just wind like it's blowing today. It rained things like soup and juice, and it snowed mashed potatoes and green peas. And sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. Oh my goodness, could you imagine? Instead of snow coming down, peas coming down, and mashed potatoes coming down from the sky. The people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction or what it was supposed to do for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, and napkins with them. That way, they would always be prepared for any of the weather. If there were leftovers, there usually were, the people took them home and put them in their refrigerators in case they got hungry between meals. This is where he's hearing the prediction or what the weather is going to be tomorrow. Look at that. He has an umbrella full, doesn't he? The menu varied, means it was different every day. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny-side-up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast, and most of the time it rained milk afterwards. Sounds like a pretty good breakfast, doesn't it? For lunch one day, frankfurters which is also hot dogs, already in their rolls, blew in from the northwest about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby. Then the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times, with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by gradual clearing with a wonderful Jell-O setting in the west. Yum, Jell-O for dessert. The sanitation department of Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. These are the people that come around and clean the streets for us. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and the sidewalks and the yards. The workers cleaned things up after every meal and fed all the dogs and cats. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish and the turtles and the whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so that the soil would be richer for the people's flower gardens. Sounds like a pretty good plan, doesn't it? Everyone was getting fed, even the earth. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. One day there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day long. The next day there was only broccoli, all overcooked. The next day there were Brussels sprouts and peanut butter with mayonnaise. Another day there was a pea soup fog. No one could see where they were going, and they could barely find the rest of the meal that got stuck in the fog. Those don't sound like very good meals, do they? The food was getting larger and larger, and so was the portions or the sizes. The people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Awful things were happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long and into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls. Some with seeds and some without. There was white bread and rye bread and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than they had ever seen bread and rolls before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers 4 days to clean up, and the sea was full of floating rolls. To help out, the people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards. The birds picked at it a bit at a time, but it just stayed there and got staler and staler, meaning it got harder and harder, and it wasn't very good to eat. There was a storm of pancakes one morning and a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because of its weight, so they had to close school. Kind of like when we have a snow day and they close the school. They had like a pancake day and had to close it. Lunch one day bought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwich. Everyone ate themselves sick, and the day ended up with a stomach ache. There was an awful salt and pepper wind accompanied by even a worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. Oh my, look at all the bread. Look at that tomato tornado. It's kind of windy out here this morning. The sanitation department gave up. The job was too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses had been badly damaged by giant meatballs. Stores were boarded up, and there was no more school for children, kind of like we are right now. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. That means everybody left the town. It was a matter of survival. It means that if they wanted to live, they had to leave the town because it was just too much food everywhere. And look at this picture. Can you imagine donuts in the street and hamburgers? Oh, look at that guy trying. That looks like a Big Mac. He's trying to lift that up and get rid of it. The people glued together the giant pieces of stale bread sandwich with peanut butter, took the absolute necessities with them, and set sail on their rafts for a new land. They were trying to find some place else to live. Look at them sailing on that peanut butter sandwich. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town, which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough for them to build temporary houses for themselves out of it. See, all that bread they took, they built houses with. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change they had to make was getting used to buying food at a supermarket. They found it odd that the food was kept on shelves, packaged in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat that had to be cooked was kept in large refrigerators. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs. No one ever got bit by a hamburger again, or hit by a hamburger again, and nobody dared to go back to chew and swallow to find out what had happened to it. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story, and I remember his goodnight kiss. The next morning, we woke up to see snow falling outside our window. We ran downstairs for breakfast and ate it a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. It's funny, but even as we were sliding down the hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter at the top, and we could almost smell mashed potatoes. And that's the end. Can you imagine living in a town like that? That would be really, really scary, wouldn't it, to see food coming down from the sky? So I hope you enjoyed that story, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. I love you and miss you, and I will see you tomorrow with a fun craft to do. Bye-bye.